Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, civil society is lashing out at the adoption of the Electoral Amendment Bill. It was meant to create opportunities for independent candidates to contest provincial and national elections. But NGO says it actually puts barriers in place. Let's get more from the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution's Lawson Naidoo. Mr. Naidoo, good morning and thank you very much for your time. Last week you pleaded with MPs. Unfortunately, some of them didn't heed your call. They voted. Now, we understand that you're going to argue that the bill should only be valid for the 2024 elections. Just talk to us about this position.
Yes, thank you very much. Before getting to that position, I think it's important to emphasize that civil society organizations that have come together, approximately 70 organizations have come together and expressed our view that the bill that was passed by the National Assembly last week is fundamentally flawed. It is unfair for independent candidates. Many people have said that the only kind of system that can fairly and reasonably accommodate independent candidates and also ensure greater levels of accountability is a constituency system, which even Chief Justice Zondo in his State Capture Commission report has also recommended, as did former President Kgalema Motlanthe in his high-level panel report and so on. Parliament has simply shut its eyes and ears to those issues. But we know that 7 political parties voted against this bill last week and 2 abstained. So there's deep division about the kind of electoral system that we need in South Africa to ensure accountability and to strengthen our democracy. And it is for that reason that we are arguing that consideration needs to be given the short timeframes that we have before the 2024 elections to make any major changes now at this late stage, that we therefore need to fix the more odious provisions in this bill that was passed last week to make it fairer for independent candidates to reduce the threshold for participation and equalize that between independent candidates and political parties, but that the electoral system that is there now, which is just a tweak of the current party list system, should only be valid for the 2024 election, and we need to go back to the drawing board and engage as a broader society. As President Ramaphosa, in fact, said last night, that the recommendations in the Zondo Commission must be subject to wide consultation. And therefore, this is the position that CASAC is taking, that there should be some sort of sunset clause that says that this legislation, once modified and then passed, will only be valid for the 2024 election.
What of those organizations that say that now this is perhaps accepting defeat, that you need to challenge it in court as a matter of urgency and not be in a position where now you request some sort of a clause that it only applies in 2024 because it will still see a great number of those independents not being able to participate, which defeats the purpose for 2024?
Well, as I said, we're hoping that we can fix some of those more unfair provisions in the bill. And it's certainly not an ideal situation, but I think we are faced with reality that the 2024 elections are a little more than 18 months away, and the IEC needs adequate time to prepare for those elections. So trying to put in place a constituency-based system at this stage is simply not feasible. It's not practical because constituencies would have to be demarcated and so on. And therefore, the fault for that lies squarely at the door of the minister, who took 18 months after the Constitutional Court judgment in the New Nation Movement case before he brought a bill to Parliament. And so the fault there lies squarely with the minister. Given where we are now, there's very little else we can do. If we're unable to pass a piece of legislation that provides a credible basis for free and fair elections in 2024, we put those elections themselves at risk, and that I think is something that nobody wants to do.
And then in the public consultation process, now with the NCOP that will come, what would be your plea to ordinary citizens about participating in such situations?
Well, I think it's become very clear that many people, not just ordinary citizens, but many members of Parliament themselves were not aware of the implications of what is in this bill. And it's only been in the last couple of weeks that people have become alive to the fact that this bill is fundamentally flawed. It's extremely unfair to independent candidates. It entrenches the power of political parties and does very little to enhance accountability. And again, as the President addressed us last night, the issue of Parliament exercising its functions properly to hold the executive to account is a problem that has been clearly identified in the Zondo Commission reports. And this is one mechanism of trying to fix that, to make members of parliament more accountable to the electorate rather than to political parties. So this is something that we're going to continue to argue before the National Council of Provinces and hopefully persuade them to make the kind of changes that are necessary, which will still leave us with an imperfect electoral system for 2024, but with a view to ensuring that there is a proper constituency system put in place for the future.
But this is an age-old problem when it comes to parliamentarians. They do toe the party line. We've seen it in several instances, particularly when we had those votes of no confidence against the former president, Jacob Zuma, that the party comes first. Whatever the position is of the political party that has deployed you, you follow that particular position. So do you ever see that changing? Because even now, with those that voted, there's probably a great majority that possibly hadn't fully read what the bill really stated or intended to do, while others knew exactly what was in the bill, but opted to keep the status quo because they towing the party line.
Well, and you've just summarized the problem that we faced is that there is very little accountability by our elected representatives. And that's the very reason why we need to change this electoral system. But I hear your point about these vested interests, and I think the public and the electorate at large need to take this into account as we go into the next election. If the parties are not willing to ensure that members of parliament are accountable to the electorate, then we need to let those parties know through the ballot box in 2024, and that we will elect a set of representatives to parliament that will engage meaningfully on electoral reform and instituting a constituency-based model that will be good for our democracy in the long term.
All right. Mr. Naidoo, thank you very much for your time this morning.